Shut Up You by Rich von Halt. The gray light of dawn filtered through the windshield as Milton Schlesinger's car cut through the vacant streets. The bald Jewish American in his 40s, curly gray hair framing his head like a messy halo, gripped the steering wheel tightly. His black glasses reflected the glow of the dashboard lights. Do you know what I hate? Milton's casual attire of jeans and a flannel collar shirt creased as he leaned forward, brow furrowed. A beat passed before he continued. How people drive in this city. We have the worst drivers. His eyes narrowed as a car swerved abruptly into his lane, the taillights blurring. Look at this guy. Before Milton could react, the offending vehicle whipped into a right turn, cutting across his path into a plaza entrance. Milton's knuckles blanched on the wheel. If I knew you were going to turn, I would have slowed down. He leaned across the console, screaming out the open window as he flipped off the oblivious driver with one calloused hand. Yeah, up yours. Milton's shoulders rose and fell with a deep, cleansing breath as he settled back into the cracked leather seat. Checking for further traffic, his eyes met the rearview mirror. I just wish they would use their turn signal. Ahead, the squat concrete building of CTVB loomed into view. Milton signaled and eased into the parking lot. We made it, eh? He killed the engine and turned in his seat, keys dangling. In the back seat, Darwin, a lanky African-American man in his 20s with wild hair, sat slumped against the door, devouring a whole watermelon. Juice stained the front of his black t-shirt. You stay here, Milton said, pocketing the keys. I'll be back. I hope this goes well. Maybe I'll get the chance to pitch my TV show. He forced a tight smile. Wish me luck. Darwin's words were garbled around a mouthful of pink flesh. No maybes, Mill. You have to go in there and show them who's boss. You have to mean business. Be that guy. Milton gave a curt nod, reassured by the younger man's confidence. He shoved open the driver's side door and stepped out, the faint trill of birds accompanying the rhythmic slamming of his footfalls across the cracked pavement. The back door window whirred down to reveal Darwin, rind shards clinging to his chin. Hey, Mill, don't be scared. You may not be the youngest, but you're definitely the wisest. Squinting against the rising sun, Milton smirked back at Darwin. He tugged his shirt straight, sucked in a fortifying breath, and strode toward the imposing double doors of CTVB. The heavy oak door thudded shut behind Milton as he burst into the conference room, chest heaving. All eyes snapped toward the disheveled latecomer. He stumbled, righting himself with an awkward stagger as a flush crept up his neck. Aaron Aronowitz flicked his gaze from his understated Rolex to Milton's fumbling apologetics. The overweight, bald with hair plugs TV executive sat rigid in his black pinstripe suit, flamboyant tie knotted in an impeccable Windsor. With a deft twirl of his pen, he cleared his throat. Sorry. Milton slunk into the closest vacant seat, back rigid under the weight of Aronowitz's glower. The older man leaned forward, elbows on the glossy table. All right, back to what I was saying. We have some interesting shows lined up for the next fall season. A pause as he surveyed the room. I want to add something more, something different. I hate competing with that three-letter network. I want something light yet heavy, something direct yet mysterious. Milton's brow furrowed in confusion as Aronowitz droned on. A quiet creak sounded from the hallway as the door inched open once more. Darwin stuck his head through the gap, thick dreads now contained in a short ponytail. Black-rimmed glasses framed his features as he slipped inside, clad in a crisp white shirt and black suspenders. He crouched beside Milton, tapping him urgently on the shoulder. Mill, what the hell is this guy talking about? A harsh whisper ghosted over his lips. Milton swiveled toward the interruption. Words clipped. I don't know. I thought I told you to stay in the car. It's hot and you took the keys. Darwin's retort was thick with reproach. My watermelon was starting to get soggy. So that's what I'm looking for. Aronowitz's nasal tones sliced through their hushed exchange as Milton refocused his wavering attention. Anyone have any ideas? The expectant silence stretched as he scanned the room, shoulders rising in a ponderous shrug. Darwin elbowed Milton sharply in the ribs. Milton wheezed, shoving the younger man's arm away with a grimace. "Now's your chance," Darwin hissed, undeterred. "Tell Aaron your story that I made up." Milton whipped around, eyes wide with panic. "What?" A hush fell over the assembled creatives as all heads swiveled toward the outburst. Even Aronowitz leaned back in his chair, scrutinizing Milton through narrowed eyes. "Milton, do you have something to share?" Milton swallowed hard, gaze darting around the room as he cleared his throat. Pushing his chair back with a screech, he rose to his feet. His hands fluttered in front of him like caged birds as he struggled to find the words. Yeah, it's not finished yet, but it's being processed." Darwin crept forward on his knees to tug insistently at Milton's trouser cuff. "Being processed?" he stage whispered. "What the hell, Mill? Give it to them." Aronowitz tented his fingers, fixing Milton with an expectant look. "Milton, we're all ears." Milton's mouth twisted in a strained smile, Adam's apple bobbing with a gulp. When he spoke, his voice cracked under the strain. "Well, it's about a guy who daydreams." A snort of derision burst from the back of the room. "You're daydreaming!" Guffaws of laughter rippled through the group as a few joined in the mocking chorus. Darwin was on his feet in an instant, stalking toward the instigator with a menacing glare. He leaned in close, the man visibly shrinking back as Darwin loomed over him. "Mill, you want me to take care of this guy?" Milton shook his head vehemently, panic flaring in his eyes. He raised placating hands as he pressed on, voice thankfully steadier. "This guy doesn't just daydream. He has an office job. Things he does in his daily life trigger him to fantasize." Nods of dawning comprehension circulated around the table as Darwin straightened, stepping away from the now cowed heckler. Aronowitz's bushy eyebrows rose in consideration. "Could be something. Do you have a title for this?" Milton puffed out his chest, emboldened. "The Cubicle Chronicles." "What else you got?" Milton's bravado deflated like a popped balloon. He stared at the executive, mouth working soundlessly as panic crept back in. Darwin clutched at his hair, eyes bulging comically. Aronowitz waved a meaty hand, disappointment etching his features. "I can see you're not prepared. Let's schedule a meeting for tomorrow morning to go over it in more detail." His tone brooked no argument as he stabbed a finger at Milton. "Have it ready! All of it!" Darwin erupted into a victory jig, fists pumping over his head as he bounced on the balls of his feet. "Who's dreaming now? Oh! The executive rolled his eyes at the display, rapping his knuckles on the table for silence. "Everyone please be aware of actors coming in and out of the building. There's other shows in the works, and casting has begun." A beat as he drank in their undivided attention before continuing. "All right, that's it. We'll regroup during the week. Thank you." Milton nodded gratefully, scooping up his belongings as the others began to shuffle papers and rise from their seats. With a final glance at the still dancing Darwin, he ducked out of the conference room into the bustling hallway beyond. Ear-splitting grins stretched across Milton and Darwin's faces as they emerged through the glass doors of CTVB. An infectious energy bubbled between them, propelling their strides down the sidewalk as Darwin threw an arm around his friend's shoulders. "If this gets the green light, who do you think will play the lead?" The younger man's eyes danced with excitement behind his glasses. Milton shrugged, the motion dislodging Darwin's grip. "I don't know. It would be great if we get an A-list celebrity." A figure brushed past, commanding their attention with a polite nod. Milton squinted against the sun's glare as the man strode by. Sandy hair, chiseled jaw, the unmistakable swagger of someone accustomed to turning heads. "Whoa!" Darwin's hushed utterance sliced through Milton's daze of recognition. "That guy can play the lead." Milton scoffed, lip curling in derision as he shook his head. That guy will never be in my series. Never." The friends pushed through the revolving door, spilling out onto the sidewalk with a roar of laughter and backslaps. Darwin, now clad in a simple black tee and shorts, executed an impromptu jig as his wild locks whipped around his face. "Can you believe it?" Milton's chest puffed out, eyes crinkling at the corners as he drank in the moment. "I know you did it!" "Huh, wow." He rocked back on his heels, reality crashing over him with sobering force. A pregnant pause before he grabbed Darwin by the shoulders, gray eyes boring into him with urgent intensity. "I have to get this set up." Clutching at Darwin's shirt, Milton's words tumbled out in a breathless rush. "Darwin, what if I mess it up?" A shake punctuated each frantic utterance. "I wouldn't be able to live with myself." Darwin's hands closed over Milton's, prying his white-knuckled grip loose as he met the older man's panic with a reassuring calm. "Mill, you're going to be great." "What if this is my only chance?" Milton persisted, shaking Darwin once more. "Darwin, Darwin, Darwin! Mill, get your hands off me!" With a sharp twist, Darwin extracted himself from Milton's grasp. They stood panting, chests heaving as the adrenaline seeped from their veins. A polite hola broke the tension, their heads swiveling in unison toward the newcomer. A stunning Spanish woman in her 30s with tumbling ebony tresses cradled a tiny chihuahua as it lifted its leg against the nearest planter. Their jaws went slack as they took in the delicate features, lithe figure left tantalizingly bare by the skimpy sundress that flowed around her curves. Milton blinked rapidly, heat prickling beneath his collar as her eyes met his. "Is everything okay?" He stepped back from Darwin, adjusting the open collar of his shirt with a nervous tug. "Yes, everything's fine." Drawn by some invisible force, Milton drifted toward the stranger, angling his body in an instinctive puffed chest display. Darwin clucked his tongue in warning. "Mill, don't go. You're allergic to dogs, remember?" Milton waved a flippant hand, the other already extending toward the young woman. "Is this your dog?" The miniature canine sniffed at his pant leg, cold nose brushing exposed ankle. The woman's full lips curved in a coy smile. "I think he likes you." Milton swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing in his throat as he flashed what he hoped was a suave, dimpled grin. "I'm Milton." Her delicate hand slipped into his calloused grip as she tilted her head, obsidian tresses cascading over one shoulder. "Francesca. Francesca." Milton savored the roll of the name over his tongue. Shooting a conspiratorial glance at Darwin, who stood frozen, watermelon cradled against his chest, he arched an eyebrow. Darwin gave an encouraging nod and subtle thumbs up, free hand surreptitiously reaching up to pinch his nostrils closed. Milton inhaled deeply, ignoring the whine of protest from his lungs as his resolve solidified. "Listen, I'm in a good mood, as you can see." "I see you were coming out of that building," Francesca interjected with a nod at the CTVB edifice, eyes glittering with curiosity. Milton puffed out his chest. "Yeah, I'm the lead writer for a television show." Her dark brows rose in obvious interest. "And you were saying?" Emboldened, Milton pressed on as Francesca toyed with a strand of hair, lips slightly parted. "If maybe you wanted to meet me tomorrow and have some chocolate cake," Darwin mouthed the non sequitur, his disbelieving gaze ricocheting between his friend and the stunning stranger. "Chocolate cake." Francesca's teeth grazed her full bottom lip as she considered the invitation. "Chocolate cake tomorrow?" Milton leaned in, hypnotized by the gentle sway of her hips. "Yes." She pursed her lips in an exaggerated pondering, finger tapping against her chin in seeming indecision before breaking into a beatific smile. "Okay, why not?" A giddy thrill raced through Milton's veins as the tension seeped from his shoulders. "Okay, there's this great place around the corner, Buddha Bellies." "Okay," Francesca agreed with a throaty purr. "I'll see you here tomorrow." "Great," Milton crowed, practically crowing as she turned on one delicate heel. "Bye." She tossed over her shoulder, Chihuahua yapping excitedly at her side. Milton pivoted, striding back toward Darwin with a self-satisfied smirk. "Chocolate cake? What's going on, Mill? You lose your mind?" The younger man's eyes bulged, dragging his palm down his face in exasperation. "You know you're allergic to dogs." Milton clapped Darwin on the shoulder with a cavalier chuckle. "Oh, but it's worth it." I hope so. Darwin shook his head, heaving a put-upon sigh as they resumed their trajectory down the bustling city sidewalk. Let's just see if she still likes you when your eyes are watering and your nose is leaking all over the place. I'll just carry a bottle of my allergy pills. Milton flashed a wink, conveniently overlooking Darwin's concerns. And what's wrong with chocolate cake? The pair continued their spirited back and forth, oblivious to the curious stares of passers-by as they hotly debated the merits of Milton's harebrained scheme. By the time they reached the parking lot, their argument had devolved into a bout of friendly shoving and insults exchanged like terms of endearment. Milton stabbed the key into the driver's side lock, grinning from ear to ear as he settled into the cracked leather seat. Things are really working out for me. Darwin slid in beside him, adjusting the rear view and rolling down the window to allow a waft of fresh air. Tomorrow should be even better, he chuckled, giving Milton's knee a reassuring pat. Just focus on your pitch. Keys jangling merrily from the ignition, Milton shifted into reverse with a decisive crunch of the gearbox. Hey, did I ever tell you about that time I was chased by dogs? The most horrible experience of my life. The tires chirped in protest as Milton swung the bulky sedan toward the exit, engines rumbling in anticipation of the road ahead. Shaking his head with a wry grin, Darwin shot his friend an indulgent sidelong glance. Mill, every day you surprise me. The air inside the laundromat hung thick and soupy, redolent with the cloying scent of fabric softener. Milton scrunched his nose, tossing an armful of graying whites into the harsh stainless drum. Quarters clinked together in his palm as he fed them into the slot, watching the digital display blink to garish life. Across the dingy tiled floor, Darwin lounged on a battered bench, an incongruous vision in his ratty white tank, basketball shorts sliding dangerously low on his lean hips. A tattered Playboy magazine dangled from one hand, lurid cover peeking out beneath the brim of his backward snapback as he kicked his socked feet up on the neighboring washer. I got a good feeling about this one, Milton muttered under his breath, squirting a thick dollop of detergent into the churning water. He straightened, casting a glance over his shoulder at his friend. You know, it's been a long time since I was in the dating game. The washer thrummed to roaring life beneath his fingertips with a shower of errant suds. Milton swiped them away, rubbing his palms together with pursed lips as he pondered his next move. I think I'm going to wear that nice blue shirt I bought. He nodded to himself, features scrunched up as he conjured the well-worn button-down. I get good vibes when I wear it. Darwin flipped a page with a dismissive snort, eyes never leaving the crinkled periodical. You get stains when you wear it! Irritation flashed across Milton's face as he whirled to face the younger man. Darwin! Hey! With a dramatic eye roll, Darwin folded the magazine and tossed it onto the empty bench beside him. Mill, one of the biggest days is tomorrow and all you can think of is the date. Darwin! Milton raised his hands in exasperation, only to be cut off by Darwin's insistent finger jabbing the air in front of his face. Milton! A heavy silence fell, punctuated only by the metallic tumbling of the washer's spin cycle. Darwin rubbed his chin, choosing his words carefully as he leaned forward with knitted brows. I know you're on a high, but you have to start thinking about the pitch. This is something you've been wanting to do for a long time. He paused, letting the weight of the moment sink in before pressing on in a placating tone. Now we have to think of how we're going to present this. Milton wilted under the younger man's earnest stare, shoulders sagging as he nodded. Darwin was right. He needed to get his head in the game. With a weary sigh, he sank onto the squeaky plastic bench, long fingers drumming out a thoughtful rhythm against his denim-clad thighs. As the dryer screeched to a shuddering halt, Milton rose, back cracking in protest as he wrestled open the stubborn door. An avalanche of blisteringly hot clothes tumbled into his arms as he began the arduous process of folding, setting each neatly pressed garment aside with meticulous precision. So, we start off with the main character being chased down the street by a low-rider vehicle, he mused aloud, brow furrowed in thought. Across the cramped space, Darwin shoved a fistful of lurid orange chips into his mouth, cheeks bulging like a foraging chipmunk as he appraised Milton's handiwork with a critical eye. "We do need to get you some new clothes." He reached out, plucking a faded cotton tee from the top of the pile and wrinkling his nose in distaste. "These are so out of style." "Hey!" Milton swatted the offending digits away, cradling the shirt protectively against his chest. "Get your cheesy hands off of them." Darwin withdrew with an abashed shrug, shoveling another mound of crunchy snacks past his lips as he spoke around the fragrant mouthful. "All I'm saying is that you're not ready for this date tomorrow." Milton froze mid-motion, shirt slipping from his suddenly limp grasp as a heavy silence enveloped them. Darwin seized the opening, pressing his point with an authoritative jab of one lurid orange finger. "You don't get your act together, Mill, you won't be going on a second date." The discordant trill of Milton's ringtone shattered the taut quiet. He fumbled the device from his pocket with a frown, forcibly smoothing his features into an expression of polite interest as he lifted it to his ear. "Hello, Milton Schlesinger here." A pause as the voice on the other end spoke, Milton's eyebrows slowly inching toward his hairline with each passing second. "I see." Darwin perked up like a coiled spring, straining to hear the tinny voice leaking from the tiny speaker. Milton waved him off, snapping his fingers to demand silence as he listened intently. "Sure thing." Another pause, this one more pregnant as Milton's gaze bored into Darwin's with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. "I can do that." "We'll see you then. I'll be there." "Great. Thanks." With a decisive stab of his thumb, Milton ended the call and met Darwin's expectant look with widening eyes. "Who was that?" the younger man asked, already knowing the answer. "Aronowitz." "Aaron Ron," Darwin confirmed with a slow nod. "What did he want?" Milton's lips stretched in a restrained grin, though his eyes fairly danced with anticipation. "Solo meeting tomorrow morning." A triumphant whoop burst from Darwin's chest as he leapt to his feet, hands clapping in gleeful applause. "See? I told you be confident." "Guess where?" Milton's voice was barely above a murmur, the words dripping with smug satisfaction. Darwin opened his palms in a wordless request for more information. Milton dragged out the suspense for a few agonizing heartbeats before delivering the killing blow with a toothy grin. "Buddha bellies!" As the understanding dawned, their hands met in a series of celebratory slaps and whoops punctuated by backslaps and victorious laughter. Milton beamed, any lingering vestiges of doubt or nerves banished by the adrenaline singing through his veins. "Two in the same day!" A beat as reality reasserted itself, the laughter trailing off into an expectant hush. "Now all I have to do is figure out the story." Darwin shrugged, polishing off the last of the chips and brushing his hands off on his shorts. "That's all you, Mill. All I can do is give you the awesome suggestions." Rubbing at the back of his corded neck, Milton slumped back against the humming dryer with a contemplative frown. "How do I figure out a way to make it interesting enough for them to green-light it?" "These are cheesy." The non sequitur pulled Milton from his reverie as Darwin waved the empty bag with a dreamy sigh. "Cheesy, delicious." Milton's grimace conveyed his disgust as he gathered up the neatly folded garments and bumped the dryer door closed with his hip. There would be time to figure out the finer plot points later. For now, he was content to bask in the fragile glow of success, no matter how fleeting. The ticking of the old analog clock ricocheted through Milton's cramped apartment like a metronome, punctuating each lap of his restless pacing. Discarded garments lay strewn across every available surface, a minefield of crumpled cotton and stubborn wrinkles that served as a physical manifestation of his inner turmoil. On the battered sofa, the television droned, flickering blues and grays casting an eerie glow over the cluttered living area. Milton paid it no mind as he chewed the inside of his cheek, brows knitted and hands wringing tirelessly. "You're right," he muttered, voice low and haunted. "Why would she want to go on a second date with me? Why did she agree to the first?" The mouth-watering aroma of fried chicken and buttery mashed potatoes wafted from the tiny kitchenette as Darwin emerged, plate piled high. The younger man's hair hung in a sleek ponytail, framing chiseled features as he settled onto one of the mismatched chairs encircling Milton's dinette set. He tugged the worn cotton of his t-shirt taut over his abdomen, shoveling a forkful of food past his lips as he regarded Milton with a dubious frown. "Mill, you're being too hard on yourself," he chided through the mouthful, shaking his head. He swallowed thickly, wiping a stray dribble from his chin with the back of one hand, before pressing on in a more insistent tone. "Now come on. What were you saying about the pitch?" Another bite, pausing to let the weight of anticipation build as he marshaled his thoughts. "Let's make it interesting, right?" Milton halted mid-stride, indecision and excitement warring across his features in a volatile cocktail. "Yeah, right. Interesting." He bobbed his head, more for his own benefit than Darwin's, already feeling the beginnings of inspiration taking root in the depths of his whirring mind. "I don't know," Milton sighed, resuming his trek around the perimeter of the room with hands jammed deep into his pockets. "He's in the dream. He's out of the dream." Darwin's fork scraped dully against the cheap ceramic plate. "Well, is he in a comedy or drama?" "I don't know. Comedy. But? Wordlessly, Darwin raised an eyebrow, daring Milton to continue down that line of thinking. When the silence stretched on, he gave a decisive shake of his head. "Mill, there can't be any buts." Milton raked his fingers through his disheveled curls, worrying his bottom lip between his teeth. After a pregnant pause, he squared his shoulders, conviction evident in his bearing as he turned to face his friend. "What if we add some suspense?" Chewing slowly, methodically, Darwin considered the proposal before swallowing once more with an emphatic nod. "Okay, now we're getting somewhere." Relief swept over Milton in a palpable wave as he exhaled heavily. "I think I have a good start to begin with." The dull roar of a vaguely familiar voice caused them both to pivot in unison toward the flickering television screen. A striking figure danced across the pixelated image, sandy hair gleaming beneath the studio lights as he grinned that million-watt smile that had graced countless billboards and magazine covers over the years. Their jaws went slack in eerie synchronicity. Milton dimly registered his heart thrumming against his ribcage, or was that the tinny jingle of the cereal commercial currently playing out? But before he could process the sensory overload, the screen faded to black once more. "See, I told you he'd be good," Darwin crowed around another mouthful of crispy chicken. The words hit Milton like a slap in the face. He blinked owlishly, any lingering awe replaced by a reflexive scowl. "That wasn't that good. You know you're just mad because I called it." The smug rebuttal radiated amusement as Darwin jabbed a greasy finger in Milton's direction. "No!" Even to Milton's ears, the protest rang hollow, undercut by the sullen swipe of his tongue over his lower lip. Undeterred, Darwin pressed his advantage with a decisive shake of his head. "And it's we, Mill. We." Milton reeled back, palms splayed in a defensive gesture. "What are you talking about, we?" Leaning back in his creaking chair, Darwin lifted one shoulder in an insouciant half-shrug. "You know I give you all of your best ideas. Stop leaving me out of it." For several heartbeats, Milton simply gaped at his friend, the words refusing to process through the whirlwind of his buzzing thoughts. When he finally did regain his powers of speech, it emerged in a hoarse rasp. "You know what's interesting?" A pointed pause as he leaned in closer, the sharp scent of fried batter and seasoning assaulting his nostrils. He drank in Darwin's suddenly rapt attention before delivering the punchline. "Action!" As if on cue, the younger man's eyes blew wide, lips stretching in a childlike grin of pure, unbridled glee. He hurriedly crammed another mouthful between his cheeks, nodding vigorously as he savored the burst of paprika and salt over his taste buds. "Action-packed!" he managed once he'd swallowed the massive bite, voice slightly hoarse from exertion. "Just like this chicken." Darwin licked a stray crumb from the corner of his mouth and lifted one finger in Milton's direction, expression suddenly stern and schooled as he elaborated. "Hints of suspense and action are great, but just add those scenes like these spices." Another forkful waved in emphasis before disappearing past his lips on the next thought. I think you should stick with comedy as our base and spice others in the daydreams. Milton opened his mouth to protest, only to find his passionate retort preempted by Darwin's dismissive hand wave. You can have that one. With a conciliatory grunt, Milton tore his focus away. The bland, unappetizing meals they'd been subsisting on were already catching up to him. His gaze swept over the riot of colors and patterns littering his apartment as he searched in vain for that cobalt pop amidst the clutter. Where's my blue shirt? He whirled toward the dinette area, zeroing in on Darwin's impassive features with pursed lips. Did you see it? The younger man appeared not to hear him, shoveling forkful after decadent forkful between his lips as he polished off the last of the feast. Rolling his shoulders in a deliberate stretch, Darwin released a satisfied belch and slid to his feet. Milton clucked his tongue in disapproval even as he resumed his quest, shaking out shirts and sifting through the piles with escalating furor. Ah, I have to find it. And so, the ritual continued. One man's frantic hunt for the perfect garment, the other casually observing with detached bemusement. The rest of the world slipped away as Milton crawled on all fours, furiously patting every nook and cranny for that elusive prize. His singular focus remained razor-sharp, tunnel vision blinding him to all but the promise of success lying in wait with that first, crucial presentation. After all, he mused with a grim twist of his mouth, first impressions were everything. The sleek revolving door granted Milton and Darwin entry into the airy dining room of the swanky restaurant. Milton led the way, shoulders squared beneath the crisp azure button-down, as Darwin dogged his steps, looming over his friend with hands clamped down firmly on his shoulders like a protective sentry. "We've got this, Mill." Darwin's murmur ghosted over Milton's nape, the deep timbre slicing through the genteel jazz wafting from the overhead speakers. A halting pause as they soaked in the opulent scene before them. Polished mahogany, starched linen, the muted clink of crystal glassware. Just say what we went over, and it will go in our favor. They drew up short, Milton glancing over his shoulder to meet Darwin's intense stare. The younger man issued a terse nod, lips pressed into a grim line as he dug blunt-tipped fingers into Milton's shoulders in a silent show of support. "Okay, from here on, you're on your own." Milton swallowed audibly, Adam's apple bobbing above the knot of his striped tie. With a bracing inhalation, he took that first fateful step forward, only to be rocked onto the balls of his feet as Darwin brought a palm swatting down against his backside in a playful slap. Milton whipped around with a snarl, but the fire behind his glare was extinguished by the cheeky grin and subtle wink that creased Darwin's features. They held the moment for several beats before Milton pivoted once more, squaring his shoulders and smoothing his hands over his trim khakis as he strode toward the solitary figure awaiting them. Aronowitz's fork paused halfway to his lips as Milton drew near, the network executive appraising him over the rims of his wire-framed glasses. With a wordless dip of his chin, he indicated the empty chair opposite as the crockery clinked against the pristine china with each measured bite. "Milton, have a seat." Milton obeyed with a polite murmur of thanks as a waiter materialized at his elbow, laden tray wobbling precariously under the weight of 4 glistening mimosas. Milton glanced at Aronowitz for confirmation before nodding slightly. "Sure." The crystal flute glimmered in Milton's grip as the condensation beaded and rolled down the curved surface like liquid diamonds. He swirled the pale orange liquid, watching the gentle surge and ebb as he mustered his courage. With a final fortifying inhale, Milton tipped the mimosa toward Aronowitz in a mock toast before parting his lips to sip at the tart concoction. Aronowitz chewed mechanically, jaw working as his gaze bored into Milton over the tops of his steepled fingers. When he'd swallowed the morsel, he dropped his hands to the table, palms flat against the linen as he leaned back with a creak of the antique chair. "All right, so let's hear it." Milton bobbed his head in a shallow nod, moistening his lips as he struggled to find the words. "Okay, so the main character is a normal guy. Who's a shy guy?" He paused, allowing the descriptors to hang in the pregnant lull before continuing. "He does simple things, and most days he avoids them. Mainly people. To his credit, Aronowitz betrayed no outward reaction, maintaining the same impassive mask of neutrality as he chewed and swallowed without breaking Milton's gaze. Unnerved by the silent scrutiny, Milton found himself fidgeting with the thin crystal stem of his mimosa, rolling it between his fingers in a subconscious bid for composure. Where the show gets interesting is that... Another excruciating pause punctuated the weighted sigh that followed. That he fantasizes. One of Aronowitz's bushy eyebrows arched infinitesimally. Fantasizes? Milton bobbed his head once more insistently this time, as he allowed himself to really embrace the concept. Yeah, everything can trigger a fantasy. Walking down the hall, scanning a document, or seeing a pretty girl. The sound of Aronowitz's fork scraping porcelain filled the void as he scooped up another bite, chewing thoughtfully. Milton shifted in his seat, fingers drumming a fitful rhythm against the tablecloth as he willed the older man to break his vexing silence. Oh, I see. Milton released the pent-up breath he hadn't realized he was holding, the words seeming to splinter the tension. But before he could retreat into the refuge of his meticulously prepared pitch, Aronowitz leveled him with another piercing look. But what genre is it when he's not fantasizing? The question blindsided Milton, whose eyes immediately sought out Darwin for reassurance. His friend was leaning against the carved wooden archway separating the dining area from the foyer, tearing languid bites from a breadstick and chewing with obvious relish. When their gazes met, Darwin flashed a conspiratorial grin and a subtle thumbs-up of encouragement. Milton's answering smile was tentative yet strengthened by his friend's bolstering presence as he turned back to Aronowitz. Well, I was thinking it can be a comedy-drama, a dramedy. Fork clattering against plate, Aronowitz wiped his mouth before placing his thick fingers over his abdomen with a contemplative frown. How? The demand hung in the air, blunt and uncompromising. How can it be a comedy when he's avoiding people and living a boring life? Milton opened his mouth to respond, but Aronowitz barreled on, the deluge of skepticism slamming into him like a physical force. Look, Milton. In order for this to work as a season, there will have to be 1 to 2 fantasies a show. Milton nodded again, desperation creeping into the gesture as his gaze flicked toward Darwin once more. The younger man offered another emphatic nod and thumbs up, his belief in Milton evident in every silent exhortation. Drawing strength from the mute display of faith, Milton marshaled his resolve and turned back to the waiting executive. He gripped the fluted mimosa glass, cold perspiration slicking his palms as he prepared to double down on his creative vision. The next words emerged garbled and strangled, sputtered between clenched teeth as the crystal flute slipped from his clammy grip. Bright orange liquid, a million tiny glistening rivulets, exploded in an arc across the snowy tablecloth. Milton watched in mute horror as the mimosa cascaded unimpeded over his crisply pressed shirt, each droplet blooming into shapeless rust-tinged blots against the azure cotton. A guttural grunt of surprise tore from Milton's throat, unbidden and visceral. The crash of shattering stemware against the unforgiving tile jolted a harried waiter into action. Milton batted away the proffered napkins with a snarl, fists balling as he lurched to his feet and began furiously swiping at the sodden fabric plastered to his chest. "Are you all right, sir?" The waiter hovered, hands fluttering uncertainly at his sides as he took in the scene. "Yes, give me those." Milton snatched up a wad of cloth squares, daubing futilely at the stain already seeping into the fibers of his favorite shirt. The waiter, cowed by Milton's gruff dismissal, made a hasty retreat. Milton paid him no heed, knuckles blanching around the sodden wad of linen as he finally slumped back in defeat. "Thanks." The mumbled gratitude trailed off into a frustrated growl as he met Aronowitz's shrewd appraisal, cold and clinical in its intensity. "Milton, get a hold of yourself." Nostrils flaring on an agitated exhale, Milton shook his head as he eyed the steadily expanding blossom of pigment now dominating his once pristine dress shirt. "This is going to take forever to get out. So back to what I was saying." Aronowitz pressed on with implacable determination. A pause as he cocked one bushy eyebrow in Milton's direction, demanding his full attention before continuing. "This means we're going to be spending a lot of time watching him in his daily life, To me, it doesn't sound like it's a comedy." Milton slumped back in his chair, defeat curdling like a leaden knot in the pit of his stomach. He opened his mouth to concede, to admit utter failure, when the first furtive seeds of an idea began to unfurl. It took root quickly, blossoming into a fuller vision that left his eyes gleaming with renewed conviction. "There's a few things I have to work out," he began slowly, choosing his words with care as he leaned across the table towards Aronowitz. "But in his daily life, he's an ordinary guy who maybe spends time with his grandmother or mom and is super lonely." Milton paused, gaze momentarily flickering toward Darwin for validation before barreling onward. "If there's a girl in his regular life, when he looks at a magazine, he sees her instead of the model that is on the cover. Then the scenes change. He's in his fantasy." Aronowitz narrowed his eyes but said nothing, allowing Milton to elaborate as he felt the fire reignite within him, stoking the embers of a bold and fully formed premise. It can turn into a Bond film from that point on, and that can go to the next episode. We wouldn't need to come back to real life at the end of every episode. Milton punctuated the crescendo with an emphatic nod, chest heaving with the force of his passionate delivery. And throughout the season he gains confidence and slowly becomes the man he wants to become. A ringing silence fell as Aronowitz studied him, an indecipherable mask once more cloaking his features. When he did finally speak, Milton held his breath in anticipation. "Okay, Milton, it's a start." The words deflated him like a bitter winter chill penetrating his core despite their neutral tone. "I'll run it by the network, but I'm not too crazy about it thus far." As Aronowitz lifted his fork once more and resumed eating, Milton chanced a final glimmer of hope, fueled by utter desperation. "What's the name of the main character?" The clatter of cutlery stilled as Aronowitz's piercing gaze bored into him. Milton licked his lips and pressed on. "Spencer. Spencer Jones." The soft rush of water provided a soothing cadence as Milton and Darwin stood in silence on the arching bridge. Milton hunched forward, forearms braced against the weather-worn concrete railing as he stared sightlessly into the glassy depths below. "I told you not to wear that shirt." Darwin's gentle admonishment finally penetrated the fog of Milton's brooding reverie. Blinking slowly, he lifted his gaze to his friend, taking in the matching azure button-down with a rueful twist of his lips. "You're wearing it?" Darwin shrugged one indifferent shoulder, fingers toying idly with the hem of the untarnished garment. "Out of support, and I still kept it clean." As if to emphasize his point, he spread his arms in a sweeping self-appraisal before favoring Milton with a sidelong look from beneath the fringe of his ponytail. "Hey, look at it this way. You did get to pitch it. Not a lot of people get that chance." A meaningful pause settled between them like a weighted blanket. "He must really like you." Milton exhaled a derisive snort, both palms scrubbing over his crestfallen features as he shook his head. "I've been working on this idea for years now, and he just shot it down." "Did he actually say no?" Darwin pressed, eyebrows arching quizzically. One hand dragged away to allow Milton's furtive glance to skitter across the younger man's expectant countenance. "No." The somber admission hung between them, heavy and palpable, until Darwin flashed a brilliant grin, white teeth gleaming in the golden sunlight. "Then we're still good." Milton's jaw clenched, shoulders slumping once more as the brief spark of hope sputtered and fizzled under the weight of his doubt. "No, no, no, no." Each repetition gained more vehemence, hammering home his denial with percussive emphasis. He said he would have to take it to the network. For a moment it seemed Darwin would let the subject drop, content to wallow in the sour taste of Milton's dejection. But then his mossy eyes sparked with a sudden flash of inspiration, one hand clapping down on Milton's shoulder with jarring force. "See, Mill, it may not be there all on paper, but the idea is there." Milton's head lolled back with a groan of frustration, focus drifting once more to the glassy swells undulating against the bridge supports below. "So what?" Undaunted by Milton's simmering despondency, Darwin pressed on with the same fierce determination that had fueled their partnership from the start. "Mill, you think these buildings are just built on top of the grounds?" Milton's brow furrowed at the apparent non sequitur, exhaustion burning behind his eyes as he regarded Darwin through a weary squint. The silence stretched, prompting the younger man to elaborate with a vague gesture at their industrial surroundings. "They're built under it." Still Milton stared, uncomprehending, until Darwin clucked his tongue in exasperation. "There's a foundation, just like your story. We have a foundation." Excitement kindled in his eyes as he turned bodily toward Milton, gripping the sleeves of his ruined shirt with intense focus. "It can get bigger, as big as we want to make it." Milton peered up at his friend through the sweat-dampened fringe of his graying hair, the words seeping in and cradling that tiny, flickering spark of hope that he could never quite extinguish. His gaze skated across the panoramic vista of the city skyline silhouetted against the blazing canvas of dusk. "Mill, how long have we known each other?" The question jarred Milton from his introspective daze. He scrubbed a hand over his face, considering his response with a wry twist of his mouth. "A long time." "How long?" Darwin persisted, arching an inquisitive eyebrow. Milton shrugged, worrying at his bottom lip as the years tumbled together. "Since I moved here when I was 6. And I always steered you in the right direction, right?" This time there was no hesitation, no gnawing uncertainty, as Milton lifted his chin in a decisive nod. "Right." Instinctively sensing his friend's lingering reservations, Darwin delivered an impassioned litany, each utterance lancing into Milton with the precision of a finely honed blade. "Unless they were trying to steal your idea." The accusation hung in the air as Milton's head snapped up, eyes blowing wide with naked fear and suspicion. His Adam's apple bobbed with a convulsive swallow, features settling into a grim mask of grim resolution. The foundation had indeed been poured. Now it was simply a matter of laying the framework and following the blueprint, no matter how ambitious the design or imposing the finished vision. Milton's fists clenched at his sides as he pivoted on his heel, already plotting the next soaring arches and flying buttresses of his creation. Milton and Darwin wove through the labyrinthine stacks of the nonfiction section, shoes squeaking against tile. Darwin's wild mane and black tee clashed with the hushed solemnity ensconcing them. Glasses perched on his nose, he leaned toward Milton. "Mill, what are we doing here?" The whisper cut through the sepulchral stillness. Milton whipped around, finger pressed to pursed lips. "Keep your voice down." Across the rows, the matronly librarian glowered over her spectacles, purple cardigan clasped at her withered throat. Her reproachful stare seared into them. "See, I told you. Keep it down," Milton hissed, hand clamping around Darwin's arm. "What are we doing here?" Fingers digging into flesh, Milton dragged Darwin into the mystery aisle. "I'm not going to let him get away with it. They have my story." Darwin's brows knitted. "What are you going to do?" They stalked toward the computer carols, purpose quickening their strides. Darwin scurried to match Milton's manic pace. "Mill, if you do something stupid, it's going to cost you." I know. Milton's jaw clenched, eyes blazing. "Shh." The librarian's sibilant admonishment lanced through the tense air. Two heads swiveled toward the circulation desk. Her hawkish gaze pierced them, mouth a bloodless gash. "Mill, we better keep it down." Darwin's murmur was taut with urgency. Undeterred, Milton lunged for the nearest computer. Ripping out the chair, he threw himself down, fingers already flying across the keys. "All right, this will only take a second." His clipped words belied the sweat beading his upper lip. Darwin crouched beside him, knees popping. "Mill, you told me you weren't going to do anything stupid." The clacking of the keys intensified. Milton hunched over the keyboard in fierce concentration. "Mill." Darwin's entreaty fell on deaf ears. "Mill." His voice rose, pitch climbing with each utterance. "Milton! I'm almost done!" Milton's roar shattered the fragile peace. "Shh!" The librarian's eyes bulged, cheeks quivering with righteous fury. Chastened, the men glanced around. She skewered them with a devastating glare. Chagrined, Milton dipped his chin in acquiescence before whirling back to the screen. "She's got it in for you, Mill," Darwin breathed, eyeing the livid woman warily. And enter. Finality rang in the two syllables as Milton jabbed the key with a flourish. Bafflement crumpled Darwin's features. "Enter? What do you mean?" A smirk slashed across Milton's haggard visage, smug satisfaction oozing from every pore. His fingers trembled as he guided the mouse, the click of the button sealing some unspoken deal with the devil. Raucous laughter cut through the bustle of the city street as Milton and Darwin ambled down the sidewalk. Condensation-slick smoothie cups clutched in their hands. Darwin's untamed mane bounced with each step, a stark contrast to the minimalist black tee and shorts ensemble he sported. "I'm feeling good, Darwin. Really good." Milton's grin stretched wide, crinkling the corners of his eyes. Darwin slurped noisily at his straw, brows waggling. "Mill, I don't know what you did, but it's got you feeling good. It's like a weight is lifted off my shoulders." Milton rolled his neck, vertebrae popping in satisfying release. "Don't take no for an answer. I like that. You go." Pride suffused Darwin's tone as he thrust out his palm. Milton met the proffered hand, slapping skin 3 times in rapid succession. Their whoops of shared jubilation cut through the drone of traffic. "You go! You go! You go!" Darwin pumped his fist, smoothie sloshing precariously. A sudden buzz against Milton's thigh silenced their celebration. Fumbling in his pocket, he extracted his phone, brow furrowing at the glowing screen. "Hey, I got a missed call." Thumbing the redial button, Milton pressed the device to his ear, free hand cupped to block out the ambient noise. Darwin gesticulated wildly, demanding attention. "We're going to have to get ready soon. We got that big date." A sly grin crept across his features before morphing into mock horror. "You better hope she doesn't bring that dog of hers." Milton waved him off, finger pressed to his lips in a silent plea for quiet. Darwin subsided with an exaggerated eye roll, slurping petulantly at his smoothie dregs. Tinny and distant, Aronowitz's nasally voice crackled through the speaker. "Milton, listen. I pitched your ideas. And guess what?" A weighted pause, pregnant with unspoken meaning. Milton's grip tightened on the phone, pulse thundering in his ears. "They loved it. We begin production this summer. Great job. I need you to knock out the season outline and first episode spec." Milton's eyes blew wide, throat working soundlessly as he struggled to process the bombshell. Aronowitz pressed on, either oblivious to or ignoring the stunned silence on the other end of the line. "See you in the morning." A click, then dead air. "Mill, what's wrong?" Darwin's brow creased with concern, smoothie forgotten as he reached out to grasp his friend's shoulder. But Milton was already moving, feet pounding against the pavement as he broke into a sprint. His untouched drink tumbled to the ground, liquid exploding in a lurid splash of color against the gray concrete. Heedless of the mess, Milton pelted down the street, arms pumping and lungs burning. Behind him, Darwin hollered his name, voice swallowed by the sounds of the city as the distance between them yawned wider. Milton's singular focus propelled him forward, homing in on his car with unerring accuracy. His key fob chirped, doors unlocking with a muted click as he barreled toward the driver's side. Wrenching the door open, Milton threw himself behind the wheel, chest heaving with exertion and barely restrained elation. A giddy laugh bubbled up from his diaphragm, erupting in a whoop of unbridled joy as he pounded the steering wheel with both fists. They'd done it. His impossible dream, the far-fetched fantasy he'd nurtured for years in the secret corners of his heart, was finally coming to fruition. As he peeled out of the parking spot in a screech of rubber on asphalt, Milton couldn't resist one final glance in the rearview mirror. Darwin stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed and smoothie abandoned at his feet. Even from this distance, Milton could read the mix of confusion and budding excitement on his friend's face. Grinning fiercely, Milton flipped him a jaunty salute before roaring off down the street, ready to seize his destiny with both hands. The car careened around a corner, tires squealing against asphalt as Milton white-knuckled the steering wheel. His foot jammed the accelerator, speedometer climbing with each frenzied pump of his heart. In the back seat, Darwin braced himself, the racing harness biting into his shoulders as he strained against the nylon webbing. His normally wild mane was tamed into a sleek ponytail, whipping against the headrest with each jarring bump. The garish sponsor patches adorning his jumpsuit flashed in the rearview mirror, a surreal counterpoint to the manic gleam in Milton's eyes. "You're going a tad fast, Mill." Darwin's voice rose an octave, seatbelt creaking as he leaned forward. Milton ignored the plea, wrenching the wheel to the left and then right in rapid succession. Horns blared, accompanied by the screech of abused brake pads as he wove through the snarl of midday traffic. "Mill, you're not even using your blinkers." A note of hysteria bled into Darwin's admonishment. The only response was another savage jerk of the wheel, propelling them into oncoming traffic. A blur of chrome flashed past the passenger window, the other driver's enraged invective swallowed by the roar of an engine redlining. "Ooh, Mill, see what happens when you don't follow directions." Darwin's knuckles showed white against his dusky skin as he clung to the doorframe for dear life. Heedless of the carnage left in his wake, Milton whipped into the CTVB parking lot. Before the car had even shuddered to a stop, he was lunging from the driver's seat, door flung wide and engine still sputtering. Loafers pounding against pavement, Milton sprinted for the entrance, blood roaring in his ears as he shouldered through the double doors with a resounding crash. The reception area was a blur of muted colors and startled faces as he barreled past the polished mahogany desk. Behind it, Darwin lounged in a crisp black suit, the silk of his pocket square winking beneath the fluorescent lights. He glanced up from the dog-eared magazine splayed across his lap, one sardonic eyebrow arched in silent inquiry. Milton barely registered the incongruity of his friend's presence before he was off again, hurtling down the narrow hallway with single-minded purpose. His breath sawed in and out of his lungs, sweat plastering his hair to his forehead as he skidded to a halt outside the conference room. Shouldering the door open with a resounding bang, Milton staggered into the room, wild-eyed and panting. At the head of the gleaming table, Darwin sprawled in the plush executive chair, dress shoes propped up on the polished wood as he idly flipped through a glossy publication. "No one here, Mill." The words were muffled around the pen cap clenched between his teeth. "Shut up, Darwin!" Milton snarled, already pivoting on his heel and storming back out into the hallway. Desperation clawed at his insides, bile burning the back of his throat as he pelted down the corridor. His pulse thundered in his ears, a staccato drumbeat urging him onward as he careened around corners and pounded up staircases. Each empty room, each deserted hallway, ratcheted up the panic simmering beneath his skin. Aronowitz's voice echoed in his head, taunting him with visions of his dreams crumbling to dust. He had to find him, had to convince him that this was all a terrible mistake, a miscommunication of catastrophic proportions. But as he burst through the rooftop access door, chest heaving and sweat stinging his eyes, Milton was forced to confront the crushing reality. He was too late. The story that had consumed his every waking moment, the characters that had become more real to him than his own flesh and blood, were lost to him forever. With a strangled cry, Milton sank to his knees, the gravel biting into his skin through the thin fabric of his trousers. Overhead, the sun beat down, a merciless spotlight illuminating his failure for all the world to see. He'd gambled everything on this impossible dream, and now he had nothing left to show for it but the bitter ashes of regret. The hinges groaned in protest as Milton shouldered open the door to his barren office. A solitary cardboard box perched on the scarred desktop, its gaping maw brimming with the detritus of a once promising career. Atop the jumbled heap, a single sheet of paper gleamed white in the harsh fluorescent light. Milton snatched it up, fingers trembling as his eyes skimmed the damning words he'd typed in a fit of impotent rage mere hours before. Behind him, Darwin lounged in the doorway, thumbing through a dog-eared magazine with feigned nonchalance. "I'm sorry, Mill." The hollow platitude hung in the air, leaden with unspoken recriminations. Milton's fingers spasmed, crumpling the letter into a tight ball as he hunched over the box, shoulders quaking. "Mill, everything happens for a reason." Darwin pushed off the door jamb, sidling closer with palms outstretched in supplication. "This is a good opportunity to focus on your writing." A strangled bark of laughter tore from Milton's throat, raw and bleeding. "I was this close to getting it made." "This close to getting nothing made!" Darwin's retort cracked like a whip, slicing through the suffocating silence. "I told you not to do anything stupid." Milton's head snapped up, eyes blazing with sudden fury. "Shut up, you!" The accusation hung between them, throbbing like an exposed nerve. Milton's chest heaved, fingers curling into white-knuckled fists at his sides. "You know this happened because of you," he spat, each word dripping with venom. "I had the green light. You made me paranoid that they're going to steal my idea." Spreading his arms wide, Milton paced the narrow confines of the office, voice rising to a fevered pitch. "Why would they do that?" Rounding on Darwin once more, he jabbed a finger toward the younger man's chest. "You're ruining my life. I'm a middle-aged man with an imaginary friend." The confession hung in the air, raw and vulnerable. Milton's throat worked, Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed back the bitter dregs of his shame. "I wish I never made you up." Darwin flinched as if struck, features crumpling in a rictus of hurt. "Mill, I can't help that you listen to me all the time. I can't help but give you advice. I can't help. I'm your imaginary friend." He paused, gaze boring into Milton's with quiet intensity. "But at the end of the day, I'm here for you. Always been." The words settled over them like a balm, soothing the jagged edges of Milton's despair. He slumped back against the desk, suddenly boneless. "Do you really mean that, Mill?" The query was soft, almost plaintive. Milton's head lolled back, eyes sliding shut as he expelled a shuddering breath. "No, of course not." The admission was barely audible, little more than a whisper. "If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be where I am today." Darwin's lips quirked, a ghost of his usual smirk. "See, I told you. You steal my ideas." Milton's hand shot out, connecting with Darwin's bicep in a half-hearted swat. The tension shattered like spun glass, laughter bubbling up from twin throats to mingle in the stale air. Sobering, Milton scrubbed a palm over his haggard features. "What am I going to do now? I'm sure you can still pitch it." Darwin's tone was light, almost airy. Milton's brows knitted together, confusion etched into every line of his face. "I already pitched it." Rolling his eyes, Darwin clarified with exaggerated patience. "I mean, you can pretend the letter came from the character and not you." Comprehension dawned, Milton's eyes widening with sudden realization. "Genius!" He reached out, clapping Darwin on the shoulder with renewed enthusiasm. "This is why I keep you around." Grinning, Darwin slung an arm around Milton's shoulders, steering him toward the door. "Come on. We have all day to come up with a plan. We have to get you ready for your date." "That's right, Francesca." Milton's features softened, a dreamy smile playing at the corners of his mouth. It vanished just as quickly, replaced by a sudden frown. "But I ruined my lucky blue shirt. I would be more worried about your allergies." Darwin's voice was sly, weighted with unspoken meaning. At Milton's blank stare, he elaborated with a waggle of his eyebrows. "You better hope she doesn't bring any dogs." Milton's eyes blew wide, panic flaring in their depths as the implications sank in. The forgotten letter fluttered to the ground, a silent herald of the chaos yet to come. Milton trudged down the sun-dappled sidewalk, shoulders slumped beneath the weight of his failures. The once crisp blue shirt hung limp and wrinkled, splotched with the telltale rust-hued stains of his earlier mimosa mishap. Each leaden step scuffed against the concrete, a metronome of self-flagellation. Behind him, Darwin loped along with the rangy grace of a stray pup. Clad in a faded black tee and fraying cargo shorts, his wild mane haloed his head in a riotous tangle. Quickening his pace, he fell into step beside Milton, bumping shoulders in a show of camaraderie. "Don't worry, Mill, this one's bound to go smooth." The platitude fell flat, swallowed by the drone of passing traffic. Milton flinched, nostrils flaring as he braced for the inevitable disaster looming on the horizon. But before he could give voice to his misgivings, a figure rounded the corner ahead. Francesca strode into view, every inch the epitome of confidence. One hand clutched the leashes of two hulking brutes, Doberman pinschers, all rippling muscle and gleaming ebony fur. Their boxy heads swiveled on corded necks, obsidian eyes glittering with barely restrained menace. Beside him, Darwin let out a low whistle. "Those are some big dogs!" Milton barely registered the words, his world narrowing to the approaching juggernaut. Swallowing hard, he pasted on a semblance of a smile and waggled his fingers in an anemic wave. Francesca's features split into a brilliant grin, teeth flashing white against her olive skin. Lifting a hand from the leashes, she returned the gesture with enthusiasm, only to blanch as the dogs lunged forward, tearing free from her grip with a clatter of metal on concrete. In the space of a single, stuttering heartbeat, the beasts were hurtling down the sidewalk, a tide of fur and fury with Milton fixed firmly in their sights. "Oh, shit!" Darwin's eyes blew wide, backpedaling furiously. "You're on your own!" Milton's jaw unhinged, a scream building in his throat as he whirled on his heel. His feet pounded against the pavement, arms pumping wildly as he sprinted for his life. The sounds of the city blurred into a cacophony of white noise, swallowed by the thunder of his own pulse. Behind him, the dogs' baying rose in a frenzied crescendo, the snap of their jaws spurring him to impossible speeds. Shopfronts and pedestrians streaked past in a blur, forgotten obstacles as he wove through the crowds. The world tilted and spun, colors bleeding together like a child's finger painting. Milton's lungs seared, chest heaving as he gulped down lungful of air. But still he ran, feet slapping against the pavement in a relentless staccato. He didn't dare look back, the prickle of hot breath on his heels warning enough of how close they'd gotten. Tears streamed down his cheeks, stinging his eyes and blurring his vision. This was it. The final humiliation in a lifetime of failures and near misses, to be brought low by his own hubris, undone by the very thing he'd always feared most. As his strength flagged and his pace slowed, Milton braced himself for the inevitable. The searing pain of teeth sinking into yielding flesh, the coppery tang of blood flooding his mouth. But it never came. Instead, the world faded to black, consciousness slipping away like sand through his fingers. The last thing he registered was the distant sound of Darwin's voice, high and panicked, calling his name. And then, nothing. The sun beat down on the cracked sidewalk as Milton and Darwin ambled toward the classic Gateway Theater, their shadows stretching long and thin before them. A gentle breeze stirred the air, carrying with it the faint scent of buttered popcorn and exhaust fumes. "Can you believe they took the series and made it into a movie?" Darwin's voice cut through the drone of traffic, incredulous and tinged with awe. Milton shook his head, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I can't wait to see it. I wonder who they got to play Spencer Jones." The theater loomed ahead, its Art Deco facade gleaming white in the afternoon glare. Faded movie posters clung to the walls, their once vibrant colors bleached pale by the relentless California sun. As they approached the box office, Darwin's new braids swayed with each jaunty step, the gold of his shirt flashing like a beacon against his crisp white pants. He paused before a particularly lurid poster, head cocked to one side as he studied the garish graphics. Oblivious, Milton rapped his knuckles against the cloudy plexiglass of the ticket window, squinting against the glare. The booth seemed empty, nothing but shadows and dust motes dancing in the thin shafts of light. After a beat, a bored-looking teenager materialized from the depths, slouching up to the window with a put-upon sigh. Her polyester vest hung loose on her skinny frame. "Ticket agent" emblazoned in chipped gold lettering over her heart. "Hello," Which movie? The words were flat, rote, a script she'd recited 1,000 times before. Milton fished his wallet from his pocket, thumbing through the battered bills. Yeah, 2 for Spencer Jones. The Cubicle Chronicles. The ticket agent blinked, brow furrowing as she scanned the show times tacked to the corkboard behind her. Her mouth worked soundlessly. Confusion scrawled across her delicate features. Behind Milton, Darwin sidled up to a gaudy poster, the fluorescent orange lettering proclaiming Spencer Jones in a jagged scrawl. He tapped the glass with one blunt finger, shooting Milton a significant look. Hey, Mill, here's the poster for Spencer Jones. Engrossed in his transaction, Milton barely registered the words. He waved a dismissive hand over his shoulder, focus unwavering. Yeah? The ticket agent watched the exchange with growing unease, fingers hovering over the ancient brass keys of her register. Milton caught her eye with an apologetic grimace, fanning the crumpled bills with one hand. She accepted the money gingerly, as though it might bite. With a few taps of the greasy keys, she produced 2 ticket stubs, sliding them through the slot in the plexiglass. Milton palmed the flimsy paper, a thrill of excitement zipping down his spine. Leaning forward, he tapped the glass with a conspiratorial grin. You know, I'm the writer. From the poster, Darwin shot him an exasperated look, eyes rolling skyward. Mill! Chastened, Milton snatched up the tickets and pivoted on his heel. I'm coming! He spared the nonplussed ticket agent one last glance, ducking his chin in a show of gratitude. Thanks. But she was already gone, retreating into the shadowed recesses of her booth with a shake of her head. Undeterred, Milton bounded over to Darwin, tickets brandished triumphantly. But his friend wasn't looking at him. He was staring slack-jawed at the poster, eyes bulging in their sockets. Check it out. It's that guy. 2 words. Innocuous on their own. But as Milton followed the line of Darwin's gaze, his blood ran cold. There, emblazoned across the garish poster in lurid technicolor, was a face he knew all too well. The chiseled jaw, the rakish grin, the artfully mussed hair. It was like looking into a funhouse mirror, his own features reflected at him in grotesque parody. Spencer Jones. The name mocked him, taunting him with everything he'd never be. As the world tilted on its axis and spots danced before his eyes, Milton clutched at Darwin's arm, bile rising in his throat. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some sort of sick joke, a fever dream conjured by his own fevered imagination. But as the theater doors yawned open, spilling forth eager moviegoers, the awful truth crashed over him in a tidal wave of despair. His life's work, his crowning achievement, it was all a lie. A fabrication ripped wholesale from the depths of his tortured psyche and projected onto the silver screen for all the world to see. As the credits began to roll and the theater lights flickered to life, Milton slumped against the faded movie poster, eyes glazed and unseeing. In that moment, he knew with sudden, terrifying clarity that he'd finally lost his tenuous grip on reality. The line between fiction and fact had blurred beyond all recognition, and he was powerless to stop it. With a strangled sob, Milton buried his face in his hands, shoulders shaking with the force of his despair. He'd always known his dreams would be the death of him. He just never imagined it would be quite so literal.